The camera drifts slowly over a quiet neighborhood. Neat rows of houses, trimmed lawns and white fences sit under a heavy grey sky. At first glance, everything looks peaceful, normal, but the silence feels wrong, too perfect, too calm. The narrator's voice cuts through, low and steady, almost like a warning. Imagine waking up to find 35 homes built, on your land. No call, no letter, no warning, just strangers living where your property once was. The shot widens. The homes stretch far into the distance, where once there was only open land, fields that belonged to one man, land passed down through generations. The wind begins to pick up. Leaves swirl across the street. Dark clouds roll overhead, heavy with rain, as if the sky itself knows what is coming. In the distance, a faint rumble of thunder breaks the silence. The narrator continues, voice colder now. No permission, no respect, no law that seemed willing to stand by him. The land was his. But in a single moment it was stolen and turned into something else. The camera focuses on one house, then another, each one standing like an insult, each one a scar carved deep into the soil. Think about it, the narrator whispers. What would you do? The question hangs heavy in the air. The camera freezes on the row of houses, and the sound of thunder grows louder. Most people would break. Most would give up, crushed by the power of the HOA. They had lawyers, rules, money, and influence. And he was just one man. But this man was not like most. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He didn't bend. Instead, he waited. He planned. He remembered the old dam sitting silent behind the hills, built by his grandfather long ago, a secret no one else cared about. Until now. The suspense tightens. The clouds grow darker. A streak of lightning flashes across the sky, lighting up the houses for one bride. Chilling second. The narrator's voice lowers to a near whisper. This is the story of what happens when you push someone too far, when you steal what cannot be replaced, when a man has nothing left to lose, except the flood he is about to unleash. The screen fades to black. Only the sound of rushing water remains, faint but rising, as the story prepares to begin. The rain had passed when the man finally returned. His truck rolled down the old dirt road, tires crunching on gravel that once led to his family's wide, empty fields. He expected to see golden grass swaying in the wind, the same open space he had known since childhood. But instead, he froze. Row after row of houses stood tall where the fields should have been. Fresh paint, shiny windows, driveways lined with cars that didn't belong to him, children's toys scattered across lawns. It looked like a whole neighborhood had grown out of the earth while he was gone. His chest tightened. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, but the sight didn't change. His land, was gone. The man stepped out of his truck, boots sinking into what used to be soft soil. Now it was paved, scarred. He walked forward slowly, as if each step hurt. His heart pounded in his ears. Then, voices. A group stood waiting near the edge of the road. Clean suits, polished smiles. They didn't look surprised to see him. In fact, they looked ready. One of them, a man with slicked-back hair and a clipboard, stepped forward. His smile was sharp, almost mocking. "Welcome back," he said smoothly. "You're standing in an HOA community now. This land belongs to us." The words hit harder than the thunder from the night before. The man felt heat rise in his chest, anger mixing with disbelief. He struggled to speak, his voice rough. "This is my property. My family's property. You can't just—" But the suited man raised a hand, cutting him off with calm arrogance. It was vacant. Wasted. We did what was necessary. The paperwork is done. The community has already moved in. You're too late." The others behind him chuckled softly, as if it was all a joke. Shock froze the man where he stood. His hands clenched into fists. He looked around at the houses again, each one like a nail driven into his chest. His open-footed, Elds, the land his grandfather had bled for, stolen in silence. He wanted to scream, to tear everything down with his bare hands, but he saw the confidence in their eyes, the way they carried themselves. They weren't afraid of him. They weren't afraid of anyone. And then he understood. The system was stacked against him. The HOA had money, lawyers, friends in the right places. To them, he was nothing more than an obstacle already crushed under their polished shoes. The man stood alone, staring at 35 homes that should never have existed. Anger burned deep inside him, but he said nothing. Not yet. Instead, he turned slowly back to his truck. His silence unsettled the smug group for the first time, though they said nothing. As he gripped the wheel and drove away, one thought carved itself into his mind, sharp and unshakable. They had stolen his land, but they had no idea what he still held. The man did not sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table, papers spread out, maps of his land, proof of ownership, all of it laid bare under a single flickering light. His mind burned with disbelief. How could 35 homes rise on his soil without his word, his signature, his choice? By morning, he had a plan. He picked up the phone. First, a lawyer. The voice on the other end sounded polite at first, but when the man gave his name and explained the situation, the tone shifted. There was a pause, then a careful answer. "I'm sorry. I can't take this case." Click. He tried another lawyer, and another. Each one had an excuse. Some said they were too busy. Others claimed there was a conflict of interest. But the truth became clear. The HOA's reach was long. Its grip was strong. Still, he didn't stop. He called the city. He demanded to speak with officials, to see the permits, the signatures, the legal grounds for what had been done. At first, he was passed from one office to another, one clerk to another. Then, finally, the line went cold. No answers. No help. Frustration clawed at him, but he pressed on. He walked into the police station, clutching his papers. His voice trembled with controlled anger as he explained what had happened. The officer at the desk listened, then shook his head. "This isn't a criminal matter. It's civil. Take it up in court." The man slammed the papers down. "Court? With what money? With what lawyer? They've stolen everything." The officer didn't even flinch. He simply pushed the papers back across the desk, eyes already moving to the next person in line. Door after door closed in his face, each one heavier than the last. And through it all, the HOA laughed. They sent him letters, thick envelopes filled with legal words meant to confuse and crush. They fined him for trespassing on his own land. They mocked him in outings, their polished voices dripping with smug confidence. To them, it was a game. A man versus a machine, and they believed they had already won. He tried to warn them. He stood before them in one last meeting, voice steady but filled with fire. "You've stolen what doesn't belong to you. You think the law will protect you. But this land, my land, has a way of fighting back." Laughter filled the room. One board member leaned forward, smirking. "And what will you do? Sue us with the money you don't have? Call the police who already turned you away? Face it, this land is ours now. You are nothing." The man stood silent for a long moment. Then he turned, walked out, and never looked back. The HOA didn't see the tight grip of his fists. They didn't see the storm building in his eyes. They thought they had broken him. But in truth, They had only set the fire burning deeper. The audience feels the weight of his silence now, the crushing wall around him and the growing truth. His rights mean nothing in their world, and yet he is not finished, not even close. The man stopped wasting his breath on lawyers and meetings. Words had failed him. The law had failed him. But the land, his land, still remembered him, and it still held something the HOA knew nothing about. Beyond the houses, past the paved streets and trimmed lawns, hills rose like silent guardians. Behind them, hidden by trees and time, lay the old dam. He had not set foot there in years. His grandfather had built it long ago, a wall of stone and steel holding back a deep reservoir of water. It was once meant to feed crops, to keep the fields alive through dry seasons. But when farming slowed and the land lay quiet, the dam had been left to sleep. Now, standing before it again, the man felt the past stir inside him. The structure was weathered but strong, its gates rusted yet unbroken. He ran his hand along the cool metal, remembering his grandfather's words. This dam is the heart of the land. Treat it with respect, and it will protect you. The man's lips tightened. The HOA thought they had buried him. They thought power, money, and rules made them untouchable. But they had built their homes below this place, and below this place, the water waited. He came back night after night, quiet, careful, tools in hand. The lock gears were stiff, the hinges frozen from years of neglect. He oiled them. He hammered loose the rust. He replaced broken pieces with parts scavenged from his shed. It was slow work, hard work, but each strike of the hammer carried his anger, his patience, his resolve. The reservoir was still full. The rains had been kind over the years, feeding it drop by drop. When he leaned over the railing, he could hear the low roar of pressure waiting behind the gates, like a giant beast chained in the dark. And he was the only one who knew how to set it free. While the HOA mocked him in meetings and stacked new fines against his name, he kept his silence. He stopped arguing. He stopped fighting their way. Instead, he listened to the groan of old metal turning under his hands. He felt the gears loosen, the chains tighten, the dam wake from its long sleep. Piece by piece, he repaired it. Bolt by bolt, he brought it back to life. Each night when his work was done, he stood on the dam and looked down the valley. The houses below glimmered with lights. Families laughed, televisions flickered, car headlights swept across the driveways. They believed they were safe. They believed the land was theirs. But only he knew the truth. One day soon, all it would take was a single pull of the lever, a single moment of choice, and everything they had stolen would vanish under the weight of the water. The man said nothing to anyone. He didn't need to. The hills kept his secret. The dam kept his secret. And with each passing day, his revenge grew stronger, just like the rising water waiting to break free. The man thought the HOA might stop. He thought perhaps they would be satisfied with what they had already stolen. But greed has no end. It started with letters, thick envelopes stuffed with fines. Trespassing on community land, unauthorized parking, failure to comply. Each one carried the same mocking tone. You don't belong here anymore. Then came the ban. The HOA board declared that he was no longer allowed to step foot on the very ground that carried his family's name. If he set foot in the neighborhood, they promised, they would call the police. The man said nothing. At public meetings, they went further. They called his name out loud, mocked him in front of neighbors, painting him as a bitter old man who refused to accept progress. Laughter filled the room as board members smirked, their voices dripping with arrogance. One leaned across the table, grinning wide. Your time here is over. The community has spoken. You should move on. The man sat quietly in the back of the room, his face calm, his hands folded. He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He didn't rise to their bait. But his silence wasn't weakness. It was patience. He watched their smug smiles, listened to their insults, and stored every word like fuel for the fire already burning inside him. No one in that room knew what he had been building in the shadows. No one guessed that while they laughed, he had been waking the dam, tightening the gears, and preparing the flood. The tension grew thicker with each passing day. It was like storm clouds gathering, unseen by those too busy to look up. The HOA saw only victory. They believed the man had given up. To them, his silence meant defeat. But silence can be dangerous. Silence can be the sound before thunder. And this man was the storm. The audience feels it now, the weight in the air, the quiet just before something breaks. Each insult, edge fine, each humiliation has pushed him closer to the edge. And when the moment comes, when the final straw snaps, the HOA will learn a lesson they will never forget. The night came heavy and strange. Clouds burned red against the horizon, the kind of sky that warned of things about to change. The man walked alone up the hill, his boots striking the earth with steady steps. He carried no papers, no lawyers, no pleas for mercy. Only the weight of silence and the choice he had already made. At the top, the dam waited. The great wall of stone and steel stood against the restless water, its gears gleaming faintly in the moonlight. The reservoir was full, swollen from weeks of rain, pressing hard against the gates. It growled low, like an animal desperate to be free. The man placed his hands on the old lever. For years it had sat untouched, frozen in rust. But now, after months of repair, it was ready. He felt the metal bite cold against his palms. He closed his eyes and breathed deep. This land was mine. This land will speak for me. With one sharp pull, the lever groaned, chains rattled, gears shrieked to life. The gates shuddered, then began to move. At first, only a trickle slipped through, then a stream, then the full weight of the reservoir exploded forward. Water thundered down the valley, a wall of force roaring into the night. Trees bent under its fury, rocks tore loose from the earth. The ground trembled as if the world itself was breaking apart, and below, the neighborhood slept. The first wave hit the lower streets in seconds. Yards vanished, cars lifted and spun like toys. The water struck foundations, slamming against them with unstoppable power. Wood cracked, glass shattered. Homes, once proud and new, twisted and fell under the flood's weight. Lights flickered out, screams rose in the darkness. Families rushed to their doors, only to see black water rising fast. Panic spread like fire. The very empire the HOA had built on stolen ground was crumbling in minutes. The man stood on the dam, watching. He did not smile. He did not cheer. His face was stone, his eyes fixed on the chaos below. Every fine, every insult, every smug laugh, they were nothing now. The HOA had thought themselves untouchable. They had believed the land was theirs, but the land had remembered its true master. The water did not stop. It tore through street after street, breaking the heart of the neighborhood. Sirens wailed in the distance, drowned quickly by the roar of the flood. What had taken months to build was gone in moments, and above it all, the man stood calm, the lever still in his hand, as the night carried the sound of his vengeance. Dawn broke slowly over the valley. The red of the night had faded into a pale grey light. Mist curled across the ground, rising from pools of water that shimmered like broken mirrors. The neighborhood was gone. Where rows of houses once stood, there was only ruin. Walls had collapsed into heaps of wood and stone. Streets lay torn apart, swallowed by mud. Cars were overturned, half buried in the earth. Silence pressed heavy, broken only by the slow drip of water running back into the soil. The empire the HOA had built, their rules, their power, their arrogance, was washed away. On the hill above, the man stood, still, unmoving. The dam stretched behind him, its gates wide open, the reservoir drained. He had not slept, but his eyes were clear. His chest rose and fell with calm breaths. He did not smile. He did not speak. He simply watched the land below, knowing what had been taken was now returned. The smug voices were gone. The polished suits, the laughter, the fines, the insults, all drowned beneath the flood. Justice, old and raw, had come not from the law, but from the land itself. The narrator's voice broke the silence, low and steady, carrying the weight of the lesson. When you take what isn't yours, don't be surprised when nature itself takes it back. The camera held on the man one last time, alone against the morning sky, a figure carved in shadow and light. Then the image faded, the sound of faint, echoing thunder rolling one last time through the valley. The music rose, slow and haunting, leaving the audience stunned, not cheering, not laughing, just silent, caught in the memory of what they had seen. And as the screen went dark, one thought lingered. This was not the end. It was only one story, and there would be more.